Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have RJ Singh. RJ, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
It is my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so Thomas, I am a director in an Australian firm called the Cora Group. I'm a shareholder as well as an executive director. So what we do at Cora is we are a disruptor in the logistics sector here in Australia. We have a non-asset-based logistics service. So what that means is companies that use transport services and warehouse companies and all that kind of stuff, instead of them going directly to the providers, they come to us and we integrate into different providers and manage the lot. So it's like one throat to choke. So that's kind of my business that I'm in with a few other guys. I also am the founder and creator of ultrahabits, which is primarily a podcast, but it is in the form or delivered really with the intention of delivering executive education focused on high performance habits, behaviors, attitudes, everything that enables people to kick butt in the corporate scene.
Well, you mentioned briefly before the call that is it inspired by ultra running?
No, well, partly. I was always a student. Well, business was a means of personal transformation for me, and we can talk about what that means later. And I was always extreme in the business community, pushing myself as hard as I could in many different ways, sometimes healthy, sometimes not so healthy. When I got into the ultra endurance community later on, I realized that a lot of the values and a lot of the mechanisms required to be a successful endurance athlete, especially in the world of ultra, has a lot of carryover into the world of commerce. There's a lot of things required to be successful in ultra that you really want to have if you're planning on being successful in a long-term way in the commerce world.
And almost like the success in ultra. I mean, I have a little bit of education, not practical application in the ultra world, but I would imagine it's like an extreme version of success in sports. So, you know, if you apply extreme principles from that into business, I would imagine there are some pretty good results that you can have there. Is that accurate to say?
That's a very interesting point. I would say what makes an ultra runner successful, if you park the genetics, because a lot of the best ultra runners were not the best marathon runners, right? Like it's a lot of the guys that couldn't beat the Kenyans. So they're like, okay, we may as well go do an ultra running, right? And what makes people successful ultra runners, I would say, other than the physical acumen, is the ability to consistently do the things that you don't necessarily want to do day in, day out, you see? And so that is very, very common in terms of what can make us successful, not only in business, but in any space. It's the consistency of the behaviors, attitudes, actions, activities, day in, day out, that compound on each other and make us successful. And that typically is where you'll find most of the super successful ultra runners, because ultra runners, if you ran 2Ks next to an ultra runner, you might be faster than him or her. But ultra runners in the land of 100 kilometers or whatever plus, a woman can beat a man. It has all that stuff, doesn't matter because it goes to another level, right? And it comes down to staying power, preparation, nutrition. There's a lot of factors beyond just the physical acumen.
Really interesting topic, and perhaps we can cover it later on. But when I read your profile, I would regret not asking you about your story. So it sounds like a fascinating one. So are you happy to go into that today?
Yeah, for sure. So yes. So I grew up in California in the Bay Area. So the other side of San Francisco, Oakland, East Bay, that area, for anyone that's familiar with California, Berkeley is not far from where I grew up. A lot of people know Berkeley. We were immigrants to the United States, and I was a hyperactive kid, orientated towards sport. Long story short, I got into lots of trouble very young. I was out of control. I would have been one of those ADHD kids, I suppose, that they would have thrown medication at, but it was a little bit before that era. And, I just got involved with the wrong crowd, the wrong stuff. And, I engaged the life of crime, right? So came from a good family, but I got in trouble with a lot at a very young age. And what happened was I developed an appetite for negative consequences very early. And because I had no sense of true north and who I was, it was a form of attention. Now, in hindsight, looking back, it was, well, if I'm not going to get praise and attention from being a superstar, which I was from sport, but for whatever reason, I just the attention that I was getting from my negative behavior was, I think something that I pursued. And ultimately, I'm in my 20s. I'm a convicted felon a few times over. I'm making money the wrong way. I'm hanging out in pool halls. I grew up in pool halls. So my parents made the mistake of buying a pool table when I was 10. I got very good, loved to hang out in pool halls. I loved fast money. I loved dodgy characters. And, in my 20s, by my mid 20s, I was kind of a career felon, really. If you would have saw me or seen me or met me, I would have been well-spoken. I was doing a business degree at the time. So I'd managed to get myself into a business school, pretty good business school, but I was living a double life. And, there was a lot of potential there. In hindsight, there was a lot of commercial potential, business potential, sorry. But I was just expressing that potential in very negative ways. And ultimately in 2008, the US government started to get a bit more strict on people and their histories and what they had been up to. And, things had happened and I decided to leave. And I jumped on a plane in 2008. I was 25 years old, had no skills, couldn't make an egg, could barely, make toast, severe alcoholic, smoked like a chimney. And yeah, I boarded an airplane, and the view was I would never be able to come back or go back to the United States, but I just could no longer deal with the consequences and how my life was going. And I knew that the end was getting near. Something really, really bad was going to happen to me. And that, I'll leave it up to your imagination, to your audience imagination. I was involved with all types of interesting characters. So I came to Australia and bounced around for 2 years. My alcoholism had reached new depths of despair. I was alone. Things were not familiar in a foreign country and no skills, but I had managed to get a job in telesales, in logistics. And so that was the beginning of a logistics career. And look, I floated around like a fart in a bottle. And a couple years later, I met a man who was a teacher, a natural teacher. And he was young. He had lived in San Francisco. He had started businesses in London. He was Australian. And he saw something in me that I probably didn't see in myself at the time. And I was 28. And he basically saw some energy. He saw some potential. And he said to me, and I paraphrase, at a coffee shop, because I told him all this and I told him in depth. And he said, look, that's interesting, but I think that you've got lots of potential and I want to mentor you. And what I need you to do is you need to sort your stuff out. You need to handle your alcohol problems, all that stuff. But I'm going to show you how to do business. And that was the beginning of a very successful relationship. We grew that business in 18 months over 100%. It was phenomenal. I was flying all over the country, didn't know what I was doing. I was cold calling, knocking open doors. He was coming, he was helping me close, but I was learning. And that was the beginning of my journey. That company, by the way, now is my biggest competitor.
All right.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah. So I've been sober over 10 years. You know, I transformed in every way, and that was a long journey. You know, there was a mental, spiritual, emotional, physical transformation that I underwent in a very, very short space in time. And I learned to channel all this energy that I had that was misdirected into a more positive way.
Mm. Have you got any thoughts, or have you reflected on where you would be, where your life would be if you hadn't met your mentor?
Yeah, I probably would have ended up I would have continued to work, but I would have been bouncing around jobs, because I think what happened was when he provided an opportunity of mentorship, I thought to myself, and I have a history of attracting to older male role models, but they were always negative in the US, right? Here was a positive role model. He was young. He was starting to show me what success could look like, right? And had he not presented that opportunity, I probably would not have decided to get sober. My drinking was reaching a crescendo here in Australia. So I think what could have happened is, had we not met, I would have never found a sense of purpose, which would have kept me on the straight and narrow through the trials and tribulations of trying to get sober. Does that make sense? And so you probably be talking to someone that's still floating around job to job. As soon as he gets uncovered, he's at a new job, drinking all night, rocking up to work in the same suit for 3 days in a row. I wouldn't have kids. I wouldn't have a wife. I wouldn't have everything that I have today, because I don't think I would have been presented with an opportunity that would have given me a sense of purpose and deep why. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you thought, or have you attempted to find a mentee in the same way that he did for you?
Yes. And I've done it several times, not only through work, but I've also done it in the recovery community, where it's part and parcel of what we do, right? So, you know, if you're talking about sponsorship, or you're talking about helping other people through their trials and tribulations, I do that in one form. But in the business world, most definitely, I would say, and I've been reflecting on this lately, that as I get older, and maybe it's having kids, maybe it's becoming more introspective, more reserved, less outgoing, I tend to open up myself less to people. I used to give myself all the time to everyone. And a lot of that might have come out of goodwill or me wanting to pontificate. But I find now, for me to take someone on, I really have to know that they're willing to do the hard work.
Mm.
And whether that's changing their life, or even mentoring them within the business context, you got to put in the work.
Because you're investing your time, you mean?
Correct. And time is no longer an asset that I have an abundance of.
Have you
Right. You
have you
know,
given any thought to why you sought role models?
yeah, it's a very good question. Um, I think I grew up with a father who was it's an immigrant's tale, right? Like, started a cleaning company in the Bay Area. He liked to drink and he liked to do his thing, but his definition of a hardworking man and father was all work. We didn't see him, and he wasn't necessarily hands-on. Throughout the journey of my street life, it was a theme that played through, where I was always looking for strong men, role models. And I don't think I knew it at the time. And they were always older, sometimes 20, 30 years older. I was 15. I was hanging around guys that were in their 40s, man. Like, and they weren't doing the right thing. I think it was because I needed to start to define who I was. And I was looking to these stronger characters, men that I thought had what I wanted, to help me define that. And it's a very powerful story of how important it is for a young person or anyone, even when I changed that 25, which isn't young, it's young, but not young, the power of influences and role models, pretty profound stuff.
Made a big difference. If you were to summarize what you were taught by your mentor, if you had to summarize it, what would you say?
The good mentor?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say what his example taught me was that if you're willing to outpace and outwork your environment, you will succeed, right? And what he also taught me as well, because I went and did an executive MBA, real tough program, was that yes, street smarts is great, and I had a whole abundance of that, but the power of a formal education as well cannot be underestimated, because he had both. And he in the business context, I used to sit in meetings with him, and he was such a trusted advisor that we would secure business just because he had an ability to counsel the prospective client on an array of different topics. And that's what I learned, is that in the world of business, you have to get yourself to a certain level of competence where a person feels like this is someone I want sitting across the table from me when I'm making difficult decisions. And that's another thing I learned from him, that you got to get to that level of extreme competence where people just want to be around you. They want to be partnered with you because you're the person at the end of the day, when the proverbial hits the fan, or they got to go to market, or they need something, that they know is someone they need on their team. And I learned that from him, and not from him telling me, but from him showing me.
I like that phrase, extreme competence. Do you use that principle in your ultra running?
Look, I in my ultra running, I got pretty good pretty fast. I'm naturally climatized to running. I'd stopped running during my MBA and picked it up 6 months after my MBA, picked up a couple sponsorships, which has been great. For me, I would say what navigates me in ultra running and everything else is perspiration versus inspiration. It's about consistently doing the actions. And I would say that's a sense of extreme ownership, if you want to use that extreme, right? It's owning everything I'm doing.
Is there a jocko influence there at all?
There is a jocko influence. In fact, I had finished his morning. He had this black book my wife bought me for my birthday. She's like, "Oh, I hope you like this guy." But I believe in that principle. I believe in a lot of, in fact, I had on my podcast this morning, Mark Devine, who is a ex-Navy SEAL. He's created the SEAL training program, and he is an anomaly because he's an MBA, CPA, intellect, but was an honor man in the Navy SEALs, right? So I really adopt a lot of the psychology within the military, within my day, because I believe in them. I believe in the principles.
Great answer. I think we could talk a lot about a lot of things there. But have you given any thought about why, or did he tell you why your mentor decided to put the time investment into you?
I think he's naturally he's a natural teacher. If you look at our industry, some of the best you look at my firm is now a competitor of that firm. He's no longer with that firm. But if you look at my firm, we're a competitor, and the senior leadership team, 2 of us were directly mentored by him. my CEO and myself, I'm the head of growth, and my CEO, we were both mentored by him. Our finance manager and a lot of our analysts came through his graduate program. So he had an appetite to teach. It was part of how his ego was satisfied, is by being that he liked to impart. That was how he got ego satisfaction, which is great. I think he took me on personally in a personal way because he knew I could get him. The level of energy I had in those days was phenomenal, because you're talking about all this energy that was used on getting hammered 24/7. All of a sudden, there was no lid on that energy, and it was crazy. And he knew that I could help the business be successful. But one thing I know about Matt is he loves the real odd case. And you've got a 25-year-old kid from the Bay Area that's come in off the back of a lot of trouble. He sees that I want to be successful. He always said to me, you knew you wanted to be successful. I just needed to show you how. And he liked the story. And that's the thing. He likes people's stories, and he then chooses to invest. And I think that's why he did. But he also saw the capability and the willingness to do anything at that time to be successful. There's nothing more powerful than having people on your team that are redefining who they are via the means that you've offered them.
Mm.
Because they're going to give you everything, right?
Sort of a leadership principle, I think. So I've heard it said that if you can help people get where they are now to where they want to be, and you can fit them into that organization, it's kind of like they want to help. They want to be a part of that process. I think that applies to you.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like he put up and the business put up, and that's why I think I will always stay in small business, because I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. But in those days I was rubbing up against everyone because I'm getting my life together. Everyone knows that. And you got this crazy person who's like a boiler room mentality, a lot of American guy. I was even more American back then, on the phone, like, yeah, rah, 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 rah. People like, dude, you're trying, this is Australia too, right? Like, it's a bit more reserved. And this guy's crazy. And I'd have outbursts, and I'd apologize, and it was a forgiving environment. It was one thing I've learned, it's come across in my podcast many times, surprisingly, talking to people in the military, athletes. We've had guest contributors from the HBR, Harvard Business Review. One theme that seems to come across is the importance and power of psychological safety. I had a lot of psychological safety there.
Okay.
And yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to pick up on something when you went from America to Australia. And that is, I sort of looked at it like it was a new start for you. But then you said would you say you took some of your quote unquote problems with you? And do you think at the time you looked at it as a way to start afresh?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So when I was leaving, I said to my dad at the gate at SFO, I'm going to make you proud. And he's in tears. And my dad is kind of not that kind of guy. I honestly believed that. And I got smashed the whole plane ride, right? And basically, it was what we call a geographical. I was simply moving location, but I was bringing myself to where I was going. And that compulsion and that urge to obliterate myself via alcohol didn't leave. The problem became that because I had a job in Australia, it brought me to my knees quicker. Back in the US, I drink all night, sleep all day. What do you care, right? Like, who cares? I was like living in a subculture. in Australia, I got a job. It's a multinational company. I'm going in there, bloodshot eyes, 7 in the morning. You want me to work at 7 in the morning, calling people, you know, and I was sick, and it was worse. And in many ways, it was the best thing for me because I had to face up, I had to front up to life. I had no escape, no family, no nothing. I had to face it. It took 2 years of being here to finally get there, where I just couldn't live like that anymore.
If you saw someone who was in a similar position to you, and you could see that they had, let's say, a potential appetite for doing better, but they had problems with, let's say, alcohol, what is it that you would say to them to help them?
You have to get sober first. And unfortunately, you can present an alcoholic or an addict of my type with $1 million, and they may or may not take it and get sober, or they can get a DUI and it may hit their rock bottom. Like, you just don't know when people have had enough. That's the frustrating and unfortunate thing. But what I would suggest is, as an alcoholic and addict, life is predictable. You know what you're going to get. Be guided by curiosity as to what's on offer on the other side of the ledger. What if you could unleash your full potential, redirect that energy to a positive way? What could life look like, and what could life be like, and be guided by that curiosity, and accept that it's going to be hard. But I actually grew the most in that first year of sobriety. It was exponential. Now it's, step changes, right?
Mm.
And in hindsight, that's when I learned, wherever there's fear or there's pain or there's hardship, and I'm not saying be masochistic, but many a times that's where we need to be going. That's where we need to be looking, because on the other side of that hard is going to be where we grow. I'm not saying anything that's not been said a million times. Unfortunately, I've seen people drink themselves to death, knowing they've got health issues or whatever, but they just don't stop.
Would you say it's up to them then? They got to want to do it.
Oh, 150%. You can start off for other people, your kids, your wife, your blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, when it gets real and when it gets hard, you're going to have a deep why. Really. You're going to have to be a deep why and a sense of commitment.
I think where you started versus where you are now, I think most people would consider that a significant success. So what are some of the things that you would share which have made that a successful journey for you? Or maybe that you've implemented, rather?
I would say this, because it can be, I'll say this. I believe that a successful life, a successful human, a performance-orientated person. This is making the assumption that I'm talking to a person that is performance-orientated, that wants to be the best they can be. They're interested in their performance. That at the apex of their life, they should be guided by the evolution of mind, body, spirit, physical. That should be the guiding force. And if we make that the guiding force, and if we make that where we're going, the decisions we make are going to be the right decisions in the main and align with our development. And success will then come to you in whatever form that looks like. For some people, it's commerce. For some people, it's learning to be a pilot. For some people, it's being a teacher, whatever, right? Be guided by extracting the best you can out of yourself in every aspect of your being. Again, mind, body, spirit, physical. I think that's fundamental. And then from there, get committed. Get committed to the activities, the granular activities that are required to grow, right? So that might mean your physical element. You like CrossFit. Okay, so you join a CrossFit gym. What are the things you need to do CrossFit? X, Y, Z. And then beyond that, what are the habits that need to be implemented? Get up early, go to sleep. See, so it's all about understanding where the evolution is, how you're going to evolve, and then what are the mechanisms to get there, and then the habits that are going to support that. That's what I would say to people.
Thank you for that. In terms of habits, I think a lot of people, they like the idea of kind of being successful in business, or maybe being a runner. You know, lots of people attempt to take up running, but they don't either have the motivation or they don't have the habits. What do you say to someone who is looking to do it but can't will themselves to do it?
Interesting one. I would say that, first of all, you have to see yourself, you have to see that particular discipline is somewhat sexy, right? So if you're not a runner, like if you're built like a Scottish dude, not to be stereotypical, you know, my wife's Scottish, right? Got big leg, like she just doesn't run, right? Like if you're built a certain way and you hate running, but for you, your idea of the fitness archetype guru is someone that can do 500 pull-ups, well, then maybe you get into a gym that's focused on functional training. So first of all, what you're pursuing needs to be attractive to you. And then I would say you get involved in a group that supports that function, right? So if it's fitness, a lot of people, let's talk about running, they join running groups. You find the people in the running group that move at your speed, they move and groove the same way you do. They then, you publicly commit, you're committing to the group that you're going to get up. I know in the UK, there are lots of running groups, park runs, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. You start to commit and you start to do. And what ends up happening is you start to lose that need to use willpower, because as you start to get the results and you start to see the change, you start to get a feedback loop from your environment and from your body. I feel good. I look good. Oh my God, I could fit in these jeans. Oh my God, look at that girl. She's looking at me. She wants to go to. So all these things start to happen that perpetuate you to stay on that path. And what ends up happening is 90 days, 6 months, a year, it becomes less willpower and more who you are. You see, interesting. The other day, I was sitting next to someone in my office. It was getting funny times and I hadn't run. I said, oh, I got to run because I got to go for a run. So I quickly changed and I'm in the office. He's like, what do you mean you have to? And I didn't realize my language I was using. Now, some may say that's extreme, but in my view, I had to do it because it was part of the commitment I made to myself to run X amount of kilometers a week, because I identify as a runner. It's part of who I am. And I then serve that identity, right? So the key is to start to do things to the point that they become who you are. And what will happen is your habits and your behaviors and your actions will support your identity. And that could be negative too. That's the thing. Doesn't care if it's good or bad.
But you actually start, after a while, you actually start itching for a run, don't you? You're like restless.
Yeah, it just and then there's that whole going overboard, right? I mean, there's that piece too. And so you just manage that. But what happens is a lot of people don't, and I learned this through sobriety, man. First of all, we need to start accepting things are going to be hard. The problem is we all have this hard aversion. We want it to be easy. Fall in love with it being hard. Once you start to fall in love with hard stuff, That's like half the battle. That's like Mark Divine says, win the battle before you start. Like win the battle in your mind. You've already won the battle in your mind because you've accepted it's not going to be easy.
The end. It's a good place.
Good questions, Thomas. Good questions, my friend.
Thank you. Have you got any goals at the moment?
It's an interesting one. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier, and it was it's about SMART goals. And I realized I actually don't have goals, really. Like I have things I move towards. Like I've got an idealized version of myself, like Maslow would call it the hierarchy of needs. Like I think it's actualized RJ, maybe like with a halo and upon a mountain. No, joking. But there's a idealized version of myself, and I continually reflect on the activities I'm engaged with, and are they aligning with the direction I want to go, right? So some may say I have goals, like I've got a short race in July and I'm training for that, and I want to do I want to get the top 3 and whatever, so I can guess their goals. But I don't look at it that way, because the training that I'm doing to get there is just, again, part of who I am. Does that make sense? So it's not like I've got this goal to get to a race and do well. The race will just come, and as a function of all the training I do as who I am, I'll just rock up to that race and aim to get top 3. So I've been really reflecting, and I'm just giving you an honest answer as to maybe I can optimize if I start to get really specific, because I know it's something that everyone talks about, but I've just never really done it.
Well, I mean, I think that if you have a clear goal, it kind of helps you with the work side of it. But if you are already doing the work, you're sort of providing the cause which produces the effect. Would you say that's applies?
Yes. So yes, and I would say I'll give you this: without a race in like looming consistently, right? Like a 30K, 40K, 50K race, I know that my training won't be approached potentially with the same level of consistency and fervor, right? So there is a goal there that I'm ensuring is then keeping, my activity that I need to do to be fit and blah, blah, blah on the path. I mean, I realized during COVID, like, I don't want to be, where there's no races. Well, why am I running on a 40K training run on Sunday? Who the hell wants to do that? Right. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just madness. Get home, you're tired, kids are screaming at you, wife screaming at you. It's like, you're like laid out, like, you know what I mean? So yeah. I mean, you're right. You're definitely right.
You're doing the work. That's the main thing. Is there anything which I haven't asked you about which you feel would be valuable for the audience?
No, Thomas, I think you've asked some really good questions. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I think that you did the deep dive, which is good.
Good. Well, RJ Singh, where is the best place for people to find you?
www.ultrahabits.co. I typically play on LinkedIn at RJ Singh, but the website has all the podcasts and everything I'm doing there. And yeah, like I said, I'm on LinkedIn at RJ Singh. You will find me hanging out there.
Cool. Thank you for all the value today.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.